you've started diving into to P300. Let's chat about that. What is P300 neuroscience? Why are you focusing there? What are you learning, and what should people care about?
Well, P300 is something called evoked potential. And what this means is if I do this and I clap my ears, you and I are both engineers, you know that there was a signal transmission delay when I'm converting the signal. There was a latency on the internet. It came out through your speakers and there was a latency before it hit your brain. But you heard it as soon as the sound was delivered. But what the science in neuroscience shows is that you didn't hear it. A third of a second after the sound was delivered to your tissues, your auditory cortex got activated. So who's in charge for the third of a second? It's actually like when they do a broadcasting on TV, there's an 8-second delay in case someone says poop or whatever they're supposed to not say. Well, your brain and your body has this built in. So your body gets to decide what parts of reality are worth showing to you. And it will filter them out reliably based on fear and based on programming. And this is not your subconscious. This is in your body. It's before it gets to your subconscious. And when the signal gets to your brain, it takes you additional time to figure out, was that a voice or a clap or what was that? And to become aware of it and do the processing. So what happens during that delay? Well, number one, young people, teenagers, about 18, have about 240 milliseconds of delay. And as you age, it goes up to about 350 milliseconds. It levels off. And if it goes much above that, you're starting to get an early sign of Alzheimer's or cognitive dementia. So we can do this for visual inputs, and we do this for auditory inputs. So this is actually a marker of aging. And I still have the response time of an 18-year-old at 240 milliseconds. Is it the modafinil? Is it the way I've trained my brain for 6 months with neurofeedback, or the fact that meditators have a lower P300D? I couldn't tell you because I do all of that stuff and then some. But what I can tell you is that the existence of this system, that's where the ego takes action. It will give you an environmental signal and an emotion at the same time, and the emotion will feel real. Even worse, there are studies showing that inside your brain, all of your memories are cued to emotions. So you remember something by imagining how it felt, and then you come up with the word. And you do enough meditation or other neurofeedback, or probably work with psychedelics, and you start developing the awareness of how the system is affecting you, and how it's entirely possible for someone who's intelligent and smart, when their body doesn't want them to hear something, they won't hear it. I've seen it straight up when I'm doing facilitation with people at 40 Years of Zen, PhDs and very, very smart people. There's something they don't want to hear. Their body will not let them hear it. You ask them a question, they'll answer a different question. It gets edited in real time. This is what the ego really does. And so in the Buddhist kind of, or any meditation framework, they say, well, emotions will happen. Allow it to come through you. Feel your heart rate, feel it, and just let it pass. Like, okay, that took a lot of electrons, guys. I could have been folding proteins. I could have been making body heat. I could have been getting shit done, right? And so, yes, but it's just going to happen until eventually you calm the storm. Well, yes, I love all that. I've been in Nepal and Tibet and ancient China. Like, there's so much value and knowledge. I've done breath work with Sri for years, like all of this. But what if you just reprogrammed the mitochondrial network so that in that P300 window, it wasn't triggered, so you didn't have to have it come through? And what I've done in my life, Peter, is I've gone through everything that's ever triggered me, and I've run a structured reset process with basically a lie detector test at 40 Years of Zen on my brain, where I re-experience whatever discomfort I had, and then I create a very specific state that you can teach someone afterwards. And that state cancels out the signal, and it cancels it out permanently. So you're just no longer triggered because it's less work. And if it's less work, then you can have more expansive views of the future. And you stack that with some modafinil, some nicotine, some caffeine, and good God, like the amount of wasted effort we have on fear and hunger. I don't have hunger signals either. Like I know the difference between a craving and hunger. So all of a sudden I'm not afraid of death. My body doesn't react to the things that should make me reactive, that would have made me reactive 10 years ago. And the amount of energy left over for living longer, I think this is one of the most important parts of longevity. And it turns out when you look at the data, people who are more stressed do die sooner from all-cause mortality.
Sure.
Maybe being triggered all the time because you never dealt with that time your teacher was mean to you in first grade is actually important. I think it is for longevity. It's underrated as a longevity thing. And that's why for 11 years, I've run 40 years of Zen. It's changed my life.
I think being able to let go and not hold on to triggers is one of the blessings I have. It's like zero time for that. Let's move forward. What's next? Where are we going?
You are one of the happier people just in general. I mean, I just finished my big 3,200 person event, and it was an amazing success, but your brain is fried. And I've seen you at Abundance 360 for almost 10 years when I come there, and you're the man of the hour. Everyone wants a piece of you. Everyone's talking to you. You're running around, you're managing the stage, you're doing all this stuff. I mean, it is so much work, but even though you're tired, you're still happy and you're in a place of service, Peter. And that's the hard thing, to not just be like so pegged out that, that you just
I remember our moment. I was like, it was late. I'm trying to get to sleep by 9:30 at my bedtime, and I'm walking by and I see there's Dave, and I'm like, stop, go over, run, give you a hug. It's like, you were here.
You remember what I said? I said, go take care of your conference. We'll talk later, because we both go through that, and
it's crazy.
And it's that being of service all day long, even though it's powerfully good for you. Yeah. In fact, it also raises BDNF and puts you in a flow state. End of the day, if you don't get that sleep and you're going to be up the next morning. At my event this year, I was picking my kids up at 9:45 at night from the airport in Dallas. And I hit something on the road, 2 flat tires, along with 25 other cars. We all got 2 flats.
Wow.
And I don't know what happened, Peter, but I meditate and all that stuff. I was the first car to get a tow truck. I had new tires on the car and was back at the hotel in an hour and 20 minutes at 10 o'clock at night. How's that even possible? To this day, I have no idea. But even then, the next day I showed up and it was the best conference I've ever had. Because of the resilience. Everything we've talked about here is about resilience. And did I wake up and take my modafinil and my aniracetam? Yeah, I did. Did I have some coffee with some minerals and maybe some MCT oil in it? Yes, I did. Because that's what works for me. But for someone else, man, if green juice is your thing, you should do it. Just watch for the kidney stones, right? Like, you got to find your stack.
All right, buddy. 40 years of Zen. I have been hearing about this. I've been reading about this. I've had incredible friends going through it. It sounds like the most transformational experience you can have in a condensed period of time. Tell us about it.
I've always been a little bit uncomfortable talking about 40 years of Zen because I feel like when people are called to it, they just come.
Okay, I'm called to it. Tell me what I'm going to experience there. I am called to it, 100%.
I started this about 11 years ago because I knew that I had a weird brain. I had Asperger's syndrome as a kid. I had brain damage from toxic mold. I've worked with Daniel Amen, and I've fixed it. And part of this was I would go do neurofeedback, but with people who are trying to make my brain average, because that's what we train to normally. I don't want an average brain. I want my weird brain just better.
Yes.
So I finally ended up hiring neuroscientists and facilitators and putting together this mix of personal development that comes from a whole bunch of different bodies of work on forgiveness. And forgiveness is actually the thing you do to drop the triggers. It's not about saying something is okay. It's just about how do I drop my own triggers? And there's a very specific recipe for that. That's called the reset process. And I'm disclosing the whole thing in the new book that'll be out next year. But it turns out your body will not let go of an old trigger unless you experience a state of awe and gratitude first. So what I do is I do a QEEG brain scan. So we know how your brain does compared to our sample set and compared to the standard sample set called the Thatcher database. So now we've got your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. But we spend 3 days cleaning out your triggers. Because if you can be triggered, you're carrying a loaded gun. And that process, it's intense. And you go in there and you run the structured reset process. And you re-experience something that was scary, and you experience this exalted state that is probably closest described as the loving kindness, but it's got more to it, and it has to be in the right order. And when you do this, suddenly, whatever that trigger was, everything that's ever been involved with that trigger goes away. So you fix a trigger, it just stops being a part of your life. And I've had some pretty heavy stuff happen in the last few years, and this has been just so helpful. I consciously uncoupled with my wife. Our total legal bill combined is less than $50,000,
which is extraordinary.
It's unheard of.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, and we genuinely want each other to win, right? And I couldn't have done that. And I don't think she could have either if we didn't have access to just turn off our triggers so that, you can step back and see things as they are instead of through the emotional lens that your body installs when you're not looking.